Introduction. Do the stars and planets really have something to tell us about the cycles of history, the secret of love, the reasons your last job was no longer right for you, and why everyone born in May is so incredibly amazing? Astrology's unflinching reply is yes, 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 and definitely yes. That the configurations of the heavens above can influence our lives here on earth below is, of course, the basic idea of astrology. Modern science has badly rejected astrology's claim, but this hasn't hobbled astrology's charms. Certainly not if the continued popularity of online and magazine horoscopes is anything to go by. Let's have to one side for a moment all the arguments about whether astrology is wrong or is right and still wrong even when it's something right. I'm here to make the case that astrology is fascinating and still tremendously relevant as a challenge to what we think we know and why we think we know it. For starters, the questions astrology asks, questions about the patterns of the universe and our place within them, are about as deep and as captivating as they come. If there are really is a way to tap into the hidden rhythms of the cosmos, wouldn't you want to know about it? But even more intriguing, at least from where I stand, is how astrology uses mathematics and data to investigate these questions. Over 2000 years ago, astrologers became the first to stumble upon the powerful storytelling possibilities inherent in numerical data, possibilities that become all the more persuasive when presented graphically in a chart or figure. Although it took a while for the rest of the world to catch on, the art of weaving a story out of numbers and figures, often to encourage a specific course of action, is used everywhere today, from financial forecasts to dieting advice to weather models. And yet numbers still mislead, figures still deceive, and predictions still fail, sometimes spectacularly so. Even those that really on exceptionally sophisticated mathematics. So, are the techniques being used today to pass and package quantitative information any more effective than what was devised by astrologers millennia ago? In order to make that assessment, it's first necessary to have a basic understanding of what astrology is and how it works. But that sort of understanding, one that's at least adequate to resolve something seamless to what technical questions, is surprisingly hard to come by for such a long-lived and influential craft. Being frustrated in my answers for a simple yet competent overview of astrology, I decided I might just as well write one myself. This curious reader is the book you now hold in your hands. My own interest in astrology stems from several directions, but mainly it's my enchantment with any sufficiently musty book from the history of science that nudged me to investigate astrology in a more detailed way. Astrology was the ancient world's most ambitious applied mathematics problem, a grand data analysis enterprise sustained for centuries by some of history's most brilliant minds, from Ptolemy to Alkindi to Kepler. Just consider that for much of the last 2000 years, the word mathematicians, mathematicus, still meant an astrologer. There was no distinction. Throughout its history, astrology's aim has been nothing short of a systematic account linking the nature of the heavens to our own human nature, and from the computations of Copernicus to the sonnets of Shakespeare, even the sculptures in Rockefeller Center, there are quite simply recesses of our culture that can be accessed without astrology's key. This is especially true in fields such as math and astronomy, where so many of the principal innovators were themselves practicing astrologers. Take, for instance, the Renaissance physician and mathematician Girolamo Cardano, who, when he wasn't busy laying the foundations of algebra and probability theory, compiled one of the first collections of celebrity horoscopes. Here, for example, is his horoscope with Henry the of England. Diagrams like this appear simply everywhere in books and pamphlets from the Renaissance and scientific revolution. For the longest time, I would skip over them, unable to make heads or tails of what seemed to me like graphical gibberish. But to an experienced interpreter like Cardano, these inscrutable hieroglyphs evidently had the capacity to peer a bottomless pot of juicy gossip. Were you taken aback by Henry's work with the Catholic Church? Well, now, who's being naive? According to Cardano, Venus in the ninth house, in a sextile aspect to Mercury, is just screaming a major change to the laws. His 6 wives? They really ought to have known better than to get involved with someone whose moon was in the seventh house in the square with the sun, while Saturn was in aspect with Venus at the same time Mars was in aspect with Jupiter, the very lord of seventh house. Talk about asking for marriage troubles. I find horoscopes, such as Henry's, exciting on several levels. First, there's the exquisitely complex astronomical calculations needed to generate a horoscope, which is really a map of the sky as seen from a particular spot on Earth at a particular moment in time. The millennial-long project to refine these calculations led directly to Copernicus' revolution and from there to modern science as we know it today. Then there was the problem of how to condense and arrange all of this information. Typically, this was done visually. The graphical depiction of the positions of the sun, moon, and planets constituted what William Lilly, by far the most notorious astrologer in England during the 1600s, referred to colorfully as a seam of heaven. As an homage to this art, I've included a number of these heavenly seams throughout this book as a way to show how the solar system was configured at key moments in astrology's history. The graphical style I've adopted, which is a bit different from Cardano's, takes the outputs of the most modern astronomical computations and displays them according to the design of a very ancient and very beautiful astronomical instrument called an astrolabe plate 1. Presented in this format, King Henry's horoscope now looks like the diagram on the opposite page. No doubtful about it, there's a tremendous amount of information here, but astrology's particular genius is that it can encode all of the complex astronomical data needed for its operation so perfectly within a single abstract image to a remarkable degree. Then the exercise of understanding astrology is really a exercise of learning how to read one of these figures. As this book unfolds, I'll describe how to do this piece by piece so that by the end you'll be able to visualize the sky in these charts as intuitively as you can see your house in its floor plan or navigate your way through a sky with a street map. To sketch out the seam of heaven like this was, however, only the beginning of the astrologer's art. It was still necessary to interpret the data once it had been reduced to graphical form, and this is where things really got interesting. As Cardano's reading of Henry VIII's horoscope shows, the sparks diagrams. Some are contained within themselves a wide multitude of possible plot lines, but which ones are expressed and which ones suppressed. To borrow a term from biology, horoscopes are like the pluripotent cells of storytelling, capable of producing many but still not quite every possible outcome. Considered this way, horoscopes offer up neatly wrapped this little package for examining the mischief that can arise when words are translated into numbers and numbers are translated back into words, even if the numbers themselves are handled with the utmost precision and care. The various ways the border get blurred between numbers and words, whether innocently or otherwise, can be thought of as a second type of sim, one that astrologers were the first, but by no means the last, to grapple with. As someone who analyzes data for a living, my curiosity about the scenes of heaven seems in the double sense of both a graphical blueprint and an interpretive sleight of hand ultimately became too much to resist. I wanted to understand them, to know how they work, to take them apart and put them back together again. And so, perhaps not fully aware of what I was getting myself into or where it all would lead, I took a deep breath. I set aside my preconceptions and I began in all seriousness to examine astrology. I can't say that calculating planetary aspects to high precision was something I ever pictured myself doing, but then again, maybe it all makes perfect sense. I love opportunities to mess up ancient and modern technology. When it comes to archaic high tech, astrology is the most formidable and therefore the most tantalizing challenge of them all. Also, with astrology, it helps to have a somewhat eclectic knowledge of both math and the languages, which, by an odd kick of my upbringing, unless fate insists on taking credit, I happen to possess. Because this combination isn't terrible rare, but it's uncommon enough that it seems to have left astrology surprisingly underexplored. Of course, in a book of this scope, it's not possible to focus on more than just a few of astrology's many facets. Certain topics, such as the astrology of India and China, I've avoided altogether on account of the fact that I know very little about them, but the traditions of Greek, Roman, and Renaissance astronomy and the modern day arts of statistical analysis are subjects which I know quite well, the latter through my profession, the former through a lifetime's fascination. Does this give me a license to write about astrology, a topic for which the whole idea of expertise seems truly up for grabs? That's a judgment you'll have to make for yourself. For my own part, I make no pretense to astrological mastery. My hope instead is simply to offer a different perspective on a subject for which it's all too easily said that there's nothing new to be said about it. At a minimum, I want to give astrology a treatment that's open and fair. Unlike many others who have a scientific background, I've never felt any particular animus toward astrology. On the contrary, its taboo status as the arch pseudoscience make it all the more delicious to think about. Why, for example, is astrology considered unscientific while economists will also use complex mathematical formulas to predict the future with results that are, let's say, mixed is regarded as a perfectly respectable field of study? Being able to articulate the distinctions, yes, but also the commonalities between astrology and other modes of asking questions about the world help to clarify which approaches are fruitful, which aren't, and why astrologers were the quants and data scientists of their day, and those of us who are enthusiastic about the promise of numerical data to unlock the secrets of ourselves and our world would do well simply to acknowledge that others have come on this way before. What profession would I, or anyone who delights in numbers, have been drawn to had we lived 500 years ago, 1,000 years ago, 2,000 years ago? Astrologers were the originators and foremost of history, the sole cultivators of a tradition that transmuted numbers and into stories, and like any story that's been retold for generations. Astrology's account of the cosmos has been refined to just its most captivating claims. Regardless of whether astrology has distilled any truth or not, what seems clear to me is that it has bottled up a certain type of magic, one that has proven time and again its ability to get us to stop and think about our connections to the wider universe against a backdrop of indifference. This is some magic indeed. So, who's to say we can't use a little of astrology's charms for our own ends, whether you're intrigued by astrology, repelled by it, or anywhere in between? We can interpret astrology's bold claims as an open invitation to explore some of the deepest mysteries of who we are and where we are. This book is my elaborate way of saying yes to that invitation, and now it's my turn to invite you to come explore these mysteries with me.